Hey, how's it going, man? Good, good. I'll just have a large black coffee. You got it. Cool Star Wars shirt. Oh, thanks, man. Have you read the Star Wars Ring Theory blog, article, write-up, piece, post from the StarWarsRingTheory.com? Yep. Yeah, I actually did. Wasn't it just like super brilliant? Didn't it just like make you have a completely new appreciation and understanding for the Star Wars prequels? I mean, it was well written and it did bring up some interesting points, but it didn't do much for me. You must have just not understood it. No, I understood it just fine. Hey, I'm gonna go sit down now, okay? Tell me why you didn't like it. Why I didn't like it? I've just heard all that before. What are you doing? Tell me why you didn't like it. I just want to enjoy my coffee and read my book. Come on, tell me. Jesus Christ. Okay. The Star Wars Ring Theory, the hidden artistry of the Star Wars prequels, is a 9-page article written by Mike Climo. Now, before I go into this, let me start off by saying this is not a jab at Mike. He seems like a genuine guy who loves something and feels the need to defend it. I've listened to a few podcasts where he is the guest, and he seems to be a good dude. This is also not an attack on the people who love the prequels. Those of you who have followed my channel for a while know that I have a philosophy of to each his own. If you like something, great, go ahead and like it. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I even made a video about this called Real Star Wars Fans. Check it out if you already haven't. With that being said, having the subtitle, The Hidden Artistry of the Star Wars Prequels, is nonsense, because it's not hidden at all. It is so obnoxiously obvious and apparent that writing a 9-page article on the subject is overkill. After reading all 9 pages, my first thought was, well, that sounded like your typical fanboy apologist, and I moved on, thinking nothing of it. I've heard the comparisons multiple times. The themes he's conveying have been evoked ad nauseum. All this article did differently was slap a name on it, calling it the Star Wars Ring Theory, tying these ideas that have been circulating for some time now into a nice little package that is easily accessible. And then, over the past few months, I've received a ton of correspondence from Star Wars fans telling me to read it, which I already had. So, since this whole Star Wars Ring Theory is gaining traction for some inexplicable reason, I figured I'd make a video about it. This ring theory phenomenon reminds me of when scientific evidence is so overwhelmingly on one side of an argument, and then some article is written attempting to debunk that scientific evidence, and then all of the deniers of that scientific evidence who wear blinders and earmuffs clamor to it, grip it, embrace it, because it's the only little thing they have to prop up their argument. The prequel lovers are flipping a shit over this ring theory thing, while the rest of us are going, yeah, that's pretty obvious. People have said this stuff for a while now, it doesn't make it good. Aren't you grasping at straws here, trying to pick low-hanging fruit? Just because 3 films have some scenes, plot points, dialogue, cuts, shots, blah blah, that are reminiscent of their predecessors, doesn't make them some grand work of storytelling genius. It doesn't even mean it was intentional, in the way that Mike is presenting it in this article. Oh neat, Anakin destroys the Trade Federation ship, just like Luke destroys the Death Star. Brilliant. How do you do it? Oh wow, a few scenes from 2 movies named Star Wars have similar shots in them, and vaguely resemble one another when placed side by side. How did they ever pull this off? How fascinating. Characters from the new movies are looking into the distance, in an award ceremony, and yelling in the same fashion as the original movies. How does one implement such effective storytelling?
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme. Every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
You know, when we were watching The Phantom Menace, that it seemed to align with A New Hope, right? A lot of connections there.
I didn't think that at all when I watched those movies.
And when we watched Clones, same thing with Empire. We saw a lot of connections.
If you're talking about recreating shots and rehashing some dialogue, maybe, but comparing it to Empire, I think most people would find that comparison quite silly, no matter how analytical, examined, and thoughtful your investigation might be.
And same thing with Sith and Jedi.
I think you all get the picture. Now, ring composition is an effective storytelling technique that has been around for millennia. It can be found in most, if not all, religious texts, but the way it has been applied in this article is such an incredible attempt at cherry picking. The article points out that precisely 9 minutes into each film, there is a scene that takes place inside a palace throne room with a group of characters watching a holographic message. Okay, how is this positive? And on the same page it says, The visuals once again subtly reinforce connections as both Qui-Gon and Luke stand before a similar looking alien creature and are framed using nearly identical over-the-shoulder shots. Once again, how is this positive? And at this point in both films, there is a transition to a scene that introduces a second Sith character into the film. Notice the similarities and transitions, a diagonal wipe moving in opposite directions, to an establishing shot of a space station, followed by a cut to the introduction inside. The article is full of these comparisons. That's pretty much what the entire article is. Visual and plot comparisons. It even goes on to compare the Jar Jar poop joke with the Return of the Jedi burps, and says that these gags were there for, quote, a greater purpose to connect the beginning of the ring to the end, close quote. So according to the article, we should all appreciate the Jar Jar step in the poopy joke, because we just don't get that it's all part of connecting the movies in one big circle, man. Like a ring, man. Brian Siri Maturos said it best when he tweeted me. The fact that we have to try this hard to explain the prequels to distract how not good they were. No kidding. This article makes it seem like George Lucas uncovered some ancient bygone mystical storytelling technique. The ring theory can be applied to a ton of movies, not just the Star Wars saga. Hell, The Empire Strikes Back singly follows this formula in a closed loop. Harry Potter fits this formula too, even fucking RoboCop. My point is, when you're looking for it, it's easy to find. It's incredible how deep some people will dig to find a nugget of gold in a pile of shit. Now, like I said, having parallel and linked scenes, plot points, and themes connecting these films is pretty well known. I mean, if you've watched the Star Wars saga, the similarities are pretty easy to spot. The problem is obviously not with a correlation between old and new, because a ton of franchises do this successfully, but honestly most fail to grasp the audience as much as the original film did. The problem is with the execution. But while it's tiring to hear people defend the prequels, it's also tiring to hear people talk negatively about the prequels. I've done a lot of that. I even have a series called Inside Star Wars where I put myself in the movies and try to tear it apart from the inside like an alien bursting out of John Hurt's chest. I try to put a different spin on things because negativity is tiring, even if the negativity is justified. Go read the article yourself. You really should. A lot of time and effort went into it. Mike Climo is a smart and savvy guy. You can tell he's educated on cinema, antiquity, and storytelling, and it's apparent that he has a passion for Star Wars. It's really cool to see so much effort being put into something like this, even if I didn't find it as groundbreaking as a lot of people surprisingly have. Like I said, while it was well written and thought out, I found most of it to be a case of grasping at straws to try and spin the conversation that is so heavily negative towards the prequels into a positive conversation about the prequels, which is fine. Sure, you can appreciate the story on paper, but we're talking about movies. And from a filmmaking perspective, the 3 prequels left much to be desired. A lot to be desired. There's a reason an enormous percentage of Star Wars fans dislike the prequels. And it's not because we don't understand ring theory. It's not because we lack a viewpoint honed by academia. It's not because we're too dumb to understand the underlying themes, yin-yang, unification of opposites, or the, quote, metaphor for the never-ending conflict between the evil and good within us all, close quote. Because we all get that. It's all pretty obvious. They're all elements that make Star Wars great. There's no denying that. This article really reminded me of those Blank and the philosophy books. Remember those? I'm sure they're still making them. I used to read them back in the day. There was a Seinfeld in philosophy, Buffy the Vampire Slayer in philosophy, hip hop in philosophy, the Beatles in philosophy. The list is huge. I mean, nearly every massive pop culture reference has been turned into one of these books. They always seemed quite goofy, taking tiny little things and turning them into some philosophical foundation. An over-the-top analysis that forcefully implies way more than what the actual subject matter offers, giving us more of what the author is thinking rather than the mindset of the creator of the subject matter. Whatever, you get my point. It's up to you whether this detailed article makes you appreciate the prequel trilogy more or not. Hey, it might, which is great. If you're like me, it didn't change a thing. You can analyze the shit out of any movie. Even movies about flying spaceships, spacemen, aliens, and lasers. But if the movie isn't fun, engaging, and doesn't touch the audience on an emotional level, well, then you've lost a large chunk of your audience. And it's not because the disenfranchised members of that audience are too stupid to understand these grandiose concepts and theories. It's simply because it's not what they're looking for in a Star Wars film. They're looking for fun in the moment, not a hyper-detailed analysis. 10 years after a film.
Always with you, it cannot be done.
It's like